Hi, and welcome to another episode of Silver Goose Farm Stories. I'm your host, Mama Goose, aka Maria Silva. Boy, do I have a lot to play catch up with in this episode of the Homestead Headlines. It's been a flurry of activity for the homestead. I suppose I say that pretty regularly, but it never ceases to be true. But I'll do a little backtracking and hopefully we'll cover everything that's been going on here the past couple of weeks. So all about June has been getting things buttoned up for when this baby comes. So we moved the pigs to a physically enclosed pen. Remember, in the wet season, we keep them in an electric fence, which I think is referred to as a psychological barrier. And this latest batch of piglets, we aren't impressed with it because for the first few months, they're small enough to just walk through the lowest rung. And by the time they're nose height to the line where it's effective, the ground has become too dry and doesn't hold a very strong charge. You can do a plus-minus connection to resolve this problem, and I think I can get into that with more detail in another episode if anyone's interested, but they're still too small for that to be effective. And so the piglets were starting to be like this like random foraging, like roving gang of piglets that would just go out all day and disappear and root around in my garden and also like possibly be traveling into our neighbors' properties, which is not a good thing, and generally causing a lot of mischief. So we definitely had to keep them contained, which is, the first rule of animal husbandry is containment. So we've got them moved over into a little a physical pen with panels that they can just walk through. The day my husband was moving the pigs into said new pen, one pig decided it was going to go off on its own and went through one of my high tunnels and literally ate through every single one of my cucumber plants. Oh, the emotions I felt, the feelings that were coursing through me. I felt like a simultaneous homicidal rage and an absolute heartbreak. I mean, maybe that was more hormonal than anything else, but, my husband came in initially after assessing the damage because I was inside. I think I was making breakfast or something. And he was just like, "I'm so sorry, Maria." But they just ate through all of the plants. And in my head, I was just assuming just that would look bad. But that, oh, no, the plants are still viable, because how could a little pig do anything that bad? But then I went out to look at it myself, and it was bad. These vines had just started, trellising up the cattle pen, and they were, fully leafed out. There were baby gherkins on everything. It was beautiful. And then this pig, this stupid pig, just stripped off all of the leaves on all of the vines, and then just, had... And maybe it wasn't intending on eating it, but just because of ripping it off of the vines, it was just snapping all the vines itself. So they were just down to little stubs. And I stood there. And normally, I'm the kind of person who tells my kids it's okay. We'll just brush it off. It's another lesson learned, and we will do better the next time. But I was so sad, and I was so pregnant, and it was so hot, and I just I kind of just hung my head and sobbed, which is a little bit sad to admit. I vacillated between the tears and also just strongly being tempted to ask my husband to go get his gun and we'll have some pork for dinner. But cucumber vines are pretty hardy, and even despite all of the damage that was inflicted upon them, some of them did manage to survive, and they are leafing out again. I think it'll, just be a late harvest and maybe not as large of one that we had intended. It was still June at the time, so we could, I did plant some extra seeds. Cucumbers grow notoriously fast and vigorously, so not all hope is lost. It was just a moment of, strong feelings. So the weather this spring and early summer has been amazing. We had a couple of hot days that caused my lettuce to bolt, but for the most part, everything has been surprisingly mild, when normally it's well into the 90s and low 100s at this point. My husband took advantage of the cooler days and butchered our first cow with the help of a neighbor that he met in passing at the local produce run. The shot was clean. The slaughter took a little less than 3 hours, which was amazing. And everything got put away and on ice before the flies got too bad. Primal cuts were put in the big barrels, and then it was all about finding the time during the week in the evenings for butchering and wrapping and putting everything away into the freezer. We did a garlic harvest for about half the crop because a few of the beds were needing more time. And my big girls helped me plant some corn and artichokes and pumpkins, which the pig thankfully did not get. We did discover that our guinea fowl, who aren't normally troublesome in the garden, were going through and just like eating the corn shoots as they were popping up in the rows. It was infuriating because I'd come out and just see these big beautiful rows of corn, and then the next day there were like empty spots, and I was wondering like, what's going on? What is eating my corn? But corn is also pretty easy to replace, and so that hasn't been a problem. And also just a quick net around the corn patch is enough of a deterrent for the guineas because they forget that they can fly over it, and they just sort of try and walk into it and then get discouraged. We've been pulling out bolted winter veggies like spinach and lettuce and putting in more beans and summer squashes and other summer vegetables as space permits. This is also the time of year where our strawberries finally start producing, so the girls have been able to collect a few treats for themselves in the morning before the birds find them and peck them out. And after all that was done, we were sort of just waiting for the baby. Every now and then I'd feel all fired up with energy and take on a massive project because nesting is such a powerful thing. And I would end up overtired and feeling mentally and physically defeated. And my husband had an ongoing wager with the kids on the order of births that would happen in the farm between myself and the 2 cows. Spoiler alert, he was wrong on all counts. So my husband should not be a betting man. But since we had some time, my husband, and the weather was still, amiable, or amiable, whatever's the right word, my husband went ahead and butchered a second cow, this one for a friend of ours. The second one, in quick succession to our first cow butchering, went very smoothly, especially because the Dexter breed, which was, the second cow, is so much smaller. It's about 300 pounds of meat versus 500 pounds of meat. So everything, cooling, storing, butchering, freezing, it's so much easier because you're just not dealing with some gigantic cuts. Anyway, Wednesday night, my husband and our friend were in our kitchen boning out some of the beef after all the children had been put to sleep. And around 11 p.m., I had to inform them very apologetically in the middle of their meat processing session that my water had broke and I needed to go to the hospital. So my husband sped me down the hill while, our friend reassured us oh, don't worry, I'll clean up and head out. And we made it to the hospital in time. My husband was in quite a hurry because my labors tend to average about an hour and a half. And it takes about an hour to get down the hill to the hospital from our house. So, time was of the essence, or at least we thought. Just some personal trivia about Maria here. We made it to the hospital in good time, and we welcomed our beautiful baby boy. And my husband and I had to stay at the hospital for a few extra days. But wouldn't you know it, that did not mean the homesteading activity took any breaks. We're super blessed to have both sets of parents living so close, and by close I mean within walking distance to our house. So the grandparents are readily available for many sleepovers and play dates and taking care of the animals while my husband and I were down the hill in the hospital. And I'm very grateful for all of their help. Like, it's amazing, like, to not have that worry in the back of our heads. Because the day our baby boy was born, my husband got a morning text message from with the update of the farm from his mom, which included the lovely tale of the neighbor's new unbroken mare having easily jumped our perimeter fence and had taken a lovely breakfast of oat hay and just was snacking through the bucket of chicken grain on our farm. And this happened twice. So thankfully, my mother-in-law was able to get a hold of the mare's owner, our neighbor, and we were able to get her back and into the barn to be halter trained, I think. But I don't think it was an easy process of doing that. We arrived back home to our farm with the littlest one in tow a few days later, and there was so much celebration and hullabaloo over the little baby and everyone's first baby brother. And this is how I started my 40 days. So in the Orthodox tradition, after a mother gives birth, the baby and mom stay home for 40 days, and it's a time to bond and heal and, shore up some immunity and also just kind of rest and recover from the whole process. But that doesn't mean that it's very quiet here on the farm. The next day after we came home, Daisy the Dexter gave birth to a healthy bull calf, and not to be outdone, Lavelle, our milk cow, gave birth to her bull calf a few days later. I know my husband was really disappointed that her calf ended up being a boy. He really wanted a heifer because they're more marketable and like profitable. But I was jokingly telling him, you got a boy, you got a baby boy, now you have 2 baby boy cows. Like, it's just boy week here at the farm. Now with Daisy, her calving was pretty easy and straightforward in terms of animal maintenance. She had her baby all cleaned, and he was already up and nursing when my husband went out to feed the cows. And Dexters don't produce an overabundance of milk like a dairy cow because they're traditionally dual-purpose cows. So Daisy was good to go. Like, we did discover that her calf likes to slip out through the electric fence and conveniently taunt his mother from the other side. She just stands there and hollers at him to come back, and he pointedly ignores her. But in terms of maintenance of her udder or her general health, she was, she's a great calver and mom and all around homestead cow. No complaints. Lavelle, on the other hand, being a milk cow, needed to be milked within 12 hours of calving. So now I'm going to admit that she'd been dry for quite some time and not trained to the stanchion because it hadn't been yet adjusted to her size. Remember, it was originally built for Cookie, a Guernsey, a much larger cow. And so it was a line item on our to-do list. But as we know, my feelings regarding the to-do list, it's just not something that we had been able to get to that summer. But as of this weekend, it was priority number 1. And my husband decided to take the first day of the heat wave, where it's 100 degrees outside, and take apart the whole stanchion, narrow it, strengthened it, leveled it out, and put it all back together again. So I think it's good to go now. He figures it'll take about a week to train her to be milked in it. And currently he's the only one that's able to milk her. She stands pretty readily for him, but the bucket makes her nervous. And so he's just been milking into the ground, which is a little sad. I mean, right now it's mostly colostrum. I think we're just getting the tail end of colostrum and now getting into the freshened milk. So we're just gonna practice with the bucket, practice with the stanchion, and hopefully eventually she'll be in there and we'll be able to, get a good supply from her. I am looking forward to being able to be out there milking with him soon. It's too hot for our little baby, and I'm actually still recovering and taking things pretty slow. So I've been feeling kind of like a useless lump on a log for a few days. And I know I'm recovering, and like it's all part of the process, but like mentally, like I'm kind of getting cabin fever. Everything on the farm is business as usual, and like I mentioned, the mild temperatures we've had have been such a blessing. They've finally given way to the heat of summer, and it's particularly difficult for me to be out in it. I'm hoping to rally soon because I'm still recovering, and hopefully I'll have more stories to share with you then. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Silver Goose Farm Stories. We always appreciate you taking the time to stop in and listen. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to contact us on our website at silvergoosefamilyfarm.com. And you can always check in on what's happening at the farm on our Instagram. Same handle, Silver Goose Family Farm. Thank you so much, and we'll talk with you again soon. Bye.